Welcome to episode 3 of Directed by Steven Spielberg. I hope you guys are enjoying this series so far. This is a bit of a passion project for me, so I appreciate anyone joining me on this journey through the filmography of the great Steven Spielberg. Today's film is his 1975 blockbuster classic, Jaws. This is very much the film that sent Spielberg's name into the mainstream, starting his reign as the king of blockbusters, and of course the rest is history. This is the first Spielberg film chronologically that I have previously seen. In fact, I have seen it a number of times, but I watched it again in preparation for this review. So without further ado, and no pun intended, let's dive in. In the vast history of iconic filmmaking, Jaws well and truly holds its place among the best, starting with the very first frame. A familiar piece of Spielberg camera work sets the tone, in the form of an underwater tracking shot accompanied by that iconic John Williams score. The story officially starts with a group of teens on a beach, where one of them, a young woman, goes for a late-night ocean swim. We then return to the first-person underwater perspective as it swims closer to the young woman, eventually attacking her and pulling her underwater. Already so many Spielbergian traits on display, particularly pertaining to the underwater threat, whose appearance remains hidden throughout this scene. We're then introduced to our main protagonist, Police Chief Martin Brody, along with his perfectly nuclear family before being called about the missing woman. It's a short but highly effective scene that's designed to do one familiar Spielbergian thing: meet our everyman. Whilst Duel is absolutely his first instance of the everyman, Jaws signifies his mainstream love affair with the concept. This scene is followed by another early example of concealment as Spielberg slowly reveals the site of washed up remains without even showing them. We're introduced next to the beach town of Amity. Brody is the newly hired chief of police who typically deals with broken fences as an example of the most serious cases of crime in this town. A masterful way of highlighting the difference in seriousness with this new case of a shark attack. We meet the mayor of Amity during the scene, a symbol of the political class, always concerned with money over safety. They opt to keep the beaches open, resulting in a young boy being killed by the shark. A scene that follows the same beats with the young woman at the beginning, once again concealing the shark from the audience. Can we take a moment though to appreciate the acting of our lead Brody, played by Roy Scheider? It's easy to get caught up in the eccentric performance of Robert Shaw as Quint or the mystery of the shark and thus forget about the everyman who represents the heartbeat of the story. Particularly in the scene preceding with the young boy's death, where he's reflecting on the events at the dinner table. He plays it subtle but very powerfully, allowing the audience to absorb the moment too and think the same thing as him. What if it were my child? The young boy's death leads to a bounty for the shark and our introduction to the film's best character, Quint. The fingernails on the chalkboard is enough to make you shiver just thinking about it. But his opening monologue is an absolute acting masterclass, and the slow pan beautifully complements the tone, evoking an eerie mood, making Quint as mysterious as the shark he's talking about. He represents the anarchy of the real world, a throwback to a bygone era that resents all modern thinking and technologies. This is perfectly contrasted by our next main character, Matt Hooper, played by Richard Dreyfuss, an oceanographer who is singularly focused on the shark, not the least bit interested in the emotional discourse surrounding the matter. A man of science who stands for everything that Quint despises. This sets up our main trio, the brains, the brawn, and the everyman. After a shark is captured and killed, the whole town, including Brody, celebrates the end of the threat. Hooper is immediately skeptical, however, determining it's not the correct shark. The mayor decides to keep the beaches open despite Hooper and Brody's warnings. Swaths of tourists make their way to Amity for the 4th of July weekend, packing the beach before tentatively entering the water. A couple of kids cause a panic, wearing a shark fin on their swimsuits before being caught. This distracts the Sea Patrol as the real shark makes its way into the nearby lagoon, killing a boater whilst Brody's son narrowly escapes. I want to note that as it stands, we're at the 1 hour mark and we have yet to see the shark in its entirety. Little more than a fin and a quick glimpse of the face has been shown. This is all intentional towards building suspense around the shark for when it is finally revealed. I feel it's worth mentioning that Spielberg would go on to use this same pacing format in another one of his summer blockbusters, Jurassic Park, withholding the main drawcard, the T-Rex, for the first hour of the film. I particularly love the shot at the end of this most recent attack when Brody stares out to the ocean as the camera slowly zooms between the legs of the bridge, looking out onto the great unknown. It's just that subtle form of filmmaking that informs the viewer about the infinite dangers the ocean poses. The fallout from this attack finally brings the mayor to his senses, setting our main trio off on their adventure to kill the shark. You get the tension early on between Quint and Hooper, pitting their opposite personalities up against one another, adding that extra sense of responsibility onto Brody's shoulders to not only kill the shark, but manage these misfits. Once out at sea, they begin making their preparations to bait the shark. Every move Hooper makes is met with a sarcastic quip from Quint about his devotion to the technology. Shortly after is our first proper shot of the shark, when Brody is dumping Chum in the water. And what a shot it is, with the close-up of Brody and the empty space to the left of screen as he pours Chum into that very space. It's like Spielberg is telling the audience to keep their eyes on that space purely through camera work. Brilliant stuff. This takes place at the 1 hour and 18 minutes mark. 1 hour and 18 minutes! That's the minute mark for the first full appearance of the film's main attraction. Could you imagine a film today coming even remotely close to concealing its main drawcard for that long? Even if a modern director wanted to do so, no producer or studio would allow it. And the fact that a young, brash Steven Spielberg had the confidence in his storytelling to do that is worth serious admiration, and boy did it pay off. With the shark now circling the boat, Quint fires a harpoon at the shark, roped to a barrel in order to track its movements. This precedes arguably the most iconic scene of the film, with undoubtedly one of the best monologues in film history. The scene begins in a light-hearted manner, with our trio drunkenly singing songs and comparing scars. It then takes a serious turn when one of Quint's scars is mentioned, leading to his story about surviving the attack on the USS Indianapolis. He goes into gruesome detail about witnessing the deaths of the men around him at the hands of a shark feeding frenzy. The scene is a full encapsulation of Quint's character, a first look into the very soul of a man who appeared to have none. The monologue is phenomenally delivered by the actor Robert Shaw and expertly gets to the heart of his character's motivations. The film then enters its climax with a man-hunting beast dynamic that slowly turns the tables on our protagonists. Any goodwill that Quint built up with Brody and Hooper is immediately lost when he smashes the radio that Brody is using to call the mainland for help. You're reminded in that moment that his motivations are purely personal and is willing to compromise the mission for the sake of money, even if it means endangering his fellow sailors. They continue their attempts to kill the shark, leading to Hooper going underwater in a shark cage. His attempts fail as the shark destroys the cage whilst Hooper swims off to hide behind coral, believed to be dead. Brody and Quint continue their attempts to kill the shark until it launches itself onto the boat as Quint slowly slides into its jaws. A disturbingly fitting end for a man who spends his life hunting sharks only to meet his end in one's mouth. Brody throws a scuba tank into its mouth and climbs up to the sinking crow's nest, firing a shot right into the mouth, exploding the great white. Hooper rejoins Brody to his relief as they paddle back to shore. The end. I can't say enough about the masterfulness of this film. You can easily see how this started the summer blockbuster trend, blending themes of thrill and adventure, key ingredients to making a hit film. As much as the film is about a killer shark, it's equally an exploration of the human spirit and what motivates us in the face of tragedy. You could almost consider the first half of the film to be a political thriller, as the community contends with the issues a tragedy poses when it comes to making money. You have a mayor more concerned with his town's image than with saving lives. But then the second half of the film starts and it's almost a completely different movie. It's now a much more intimate story about three men setting out to kill a shark. The entire population of Amity gets completely left behind in the process. From a filmmaking standpoint, one of the things that really impressed me watching Jaws this time around was Spielberg's ability to create fear and suspense through various means. Whether it be the first-person perspective of the shark or using objects to indicate the shark's movements, everything except showing the actual thing, which he knows is far more terrifying. If I'm going to slightly nitpick, I felt the climax meandered a little, taking a little too long to reach the end. It's almost like he had this perfect pace throughout the film that anything to the contrary just feels a little off. By no means is it a bad ending, it's a great ending to a great film, albeit if the pacing was just a little off during that portion. But all in all, Jaws is an incredible film that I thoroughly enjoyed revisiting. What a classic. Jaws absolutely holds up to this day, almost 50 years since its release. It's a massive step up in Spielberg's filmmaking prowess, and you can really see how it launched him into superstardom. It's almost a solemn reminder of how much you can thrill an audience using very little. Jaws to me is easily an 8.5 out of 10, placing it atop my Spielberg list of films, replacing Duel as my current favorite. Thank you once again for watching. I hope you enjoyed my breakdown of this classic film. Make sure to tune in for my upcoming 4th episode in my Directed by Steven Spielberg series of videos. This time it will be focused on the 1977 sci-fi film Close Encounters of the Third Kind. Until then, thank you for watching and we'll talk to you next time. Bye.